Tracy, thank you very much. Your first budget presentation in our district, and I just want to tell you what a great job you did, both in the packet and also in your presentation. So thanks for all your work.
Thank you.
We really appreciate it. And I liked that I appreciate you acknowledging the high percentage of local support, because it's always interesting to get the perspective of a CDO coming from another district, another area. So I really appreciated you sharing your perspective on it. Questions from the board?
Yes, I have a couple of questions or comments. So I guess I'm looking at page 10, 11 on LCFF. The page 11 where it says our LCFF phase in $17 million and you said later it's 1.9. Just to clarify to everybody, this is replacing revenue limit and categoricals, and it's not necessarily new money. And the other thing I think is kind of confusing sometimes, and this is just a comment, and I know we've always done it this way, but where we have this pie chart, page 15, and then it says state 7%. In my mind, that's really other state funding, other than LCFF, because LCFF is state funding. And yet my question is, let's see. So I just wanted to say that, okay, my question is, and I don't know if we have this information, but how this compares to where we were with revenue limit either now or going out to, at any point, where are we compared to 07, 08 when the budget cuts happened? Do we happen to know? Did anyone look at that? Joe?
No, I don't.
Okay, because I mean, we've been trying to climb out of the hole from 07, 08 when the budget cuts happened. And we're getting in much better shape, or maybe we're about there, but I always get concerned when I see all this talk of an increase in money when we've had such bad budget cuts over the years, over the last 5 years. And then the other thing I wanted to say was regarding the Prop 30. So that was on page, I forget. There's a page where it's on talking about Prop 30, and here it is, page 13, 12 and 13. And the EPA protection account. So I gather, and maybe you said this, but I just missed it. Page 12, the EPA account, it says 2.8 million. Is that what we get from Prop 30?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. So on the next page, saying yes, it will expire in 17, 18. What I hear from the state is, from the governor anyways, that he's not wanting to renew it. So, I mean, I sure hope the state does something to fill that hole, but we, as a board, can't count on that. Going forward, we have to, just like any parcel tax, assume it's going to expire. So I just wanted to say that out loud. And then also, there was one other thing I wanted to comment on. Yes, the CalSTRS and CalPERS. Page 24 and page 25. And I just, I know this is a huge hit, again, from the governor, right? This is from the governor. He assigned this to every school district to pay for this, as opposed to some other way in the state paying for it, which is very unfortunate for us. But what I don't understand is on page 24, under G, CalSTRS and H, and then it says 15, 16, 1.85%. It doesn't look that bad. And then when you look down on the next page, you've got STRS rate 15, 16, 10.73. What is the difference there?
I'm showing just the increase in the assumptions.
Okay, the 1.85 is the increase.
Increase in the rate.
Increase from the previous year?
Yes.
Okay. Got it. And then below, and then the next page, those numbers are the actual dollars of what that's costing us.
Yes, that's correct.
And that's a huge hit.
It's frightening.
Yeah, that's just really, really huge. And I think districts that get more supplemental LCFF dollars have less of a challenge, I guess is the way you put it. I mean, wouldn't they have the same amount of CalSTRS? CalSTRS is based on the number of employees you have, right?
Yes.
Okay,
It's
so
just based on your salaries.
based on the salaries. So a similar district the same size as us, but if they happen to have a lot of unduplicated students and get a lot of LCFF money, then they'd be more easily able to compensate, I would think.
I think their challenge will still remain the same. They just have different components that they're receiving funding from. If they have an increase in supplemental concentration grant monies that they are applying to salaries, they'll still have that continued increase against those salaries.
Okay. All right. And then lastly, on page 27, where you have multi-year projections, you know, that's a real, I think, the most important page in this whole document, because it shows that even though, you know, we think we got a lot of money in LCFF money this year because of the expenditures, and then looking 2 years out, our revenues equal the expenditures. And so that's what's the challenge for us. If we increased expenditures, you know, how do we avoid deficit spending?
Can I just follow up on that and just ask Teresa, what amount of funds do we have available for ongoing?
The LCFF is projected to increase almost $1.5 million, but taking into consideration the new programs, the extended daycare, the new staffing, the PERS and STIRS, and the increase to M&O contribution, it's just under $300,000 of ongoing revenue. That it's about $295,000, so just under $300,000 of ongoing. So as you can see, we went from almost $1.5 million, but due to implementation and increased costs, that does equate to just roughly under $300,000.
Thank you.
So I have one more comment on page 37, which is in summary, where it's talking about the Common Core. I remember again hearing in the governor's speech or something about why he allotted that mandated cost reimbursement money, and that he was hoping that districts would allocate some of that to Common Core because there is no more Common Core money. And whether we do that or not, I wanted to point out that the previous Common Core money that we had that just expired we were told to use it for instructional materials, technology, and professional development, if I remember correctly. So given that we're no longer have that Common Core money, I don't, you know, you alluded to the fact that we could give some direction about that. That would make sense for us to use some of that for Common Core, and maybe that's where, you know, I don't know how we would break it out if we did that into those 3 areas, but we would need a recommendation from staff on that. And also, I just wanted to highlight above that 3% maintenance fee. That's a pretty big deal, because I know we had to cut our, you know, maintenance fees before because of the budget cuts and categoricals, and it was down to 1%, and now it's gone back up to 3%. So that's good for our facilities, right? That we're going to have money to maintain our facilities, but it hurts our budget because we are required to spend that. so. Okay, thank you.
Julie?
Joe, I'm just wondering if you can discuss with us a little bit on the allocating some of those monies of the mandated cost reimbursement for Common Core materials or funding similar to what we had for the last 2 years. Do we have as great a need for like a similar amount of money, or because we purchased some instructional materials, is it a lower dollar amount? Has any thought gone into that yet?
That's a very good question. And we have just started thinking about it because, one, receiving this money so recently, we weren't counting on getting any Common Core money, so we were scrambling in the budget looking for, well, where could we cover some of these areas? And in a minute, I'll ask Kathy to jump in, and also Ray, because they, are on the ground there in terms of these areas. But generally speaking, when we look back at the Common Core dollars, which was that amount over 2 years, there were some of those activities that we would certainly be looking at desirable to replicate next year. Perfect example, we had additional technology contracted staffing during the testing program to assist everyone in doing that. We use those to pay for those contracts on a temporary basis for coming in healthy. And we know we're going to be tested next year, and we don't have any funds set aside to do that. So it would be items like that. But I would ask Kathy and then Ray to share any of those concrete items that would be important to funding staff development, instructional materials.
Certainly on the instructional materials, and over the next 5 to 8 years, there will be a continuing focus on new adoptions. We've just recently done the math adoption, but we have science, and we also have history, social science, and English language arts. So these funds could be targeted depending on the cycle to help us in that, particularly in the area of science, which is in our LCAP. And so I see that. And the professional learning, we are, as we've talked about this year, and so we're growing and advancing as professionals, and so that is changing. It's changing each year with the Common Core. It was made reference with regard to the English Language Arts ELD frameworks. This is a brand new framework that has come up from the state where the English language development standards are embedded in the English Language Arts framework, and this is new for us. The document is online, but it hasn't been published yet, but it has been approved. So how we do that would be a component, and so supporting each other and having those collaboration times to really look for best practices would be key, and so this funding would continue on that mission. The technology component, instructional technology, specifically in partnership with the technology department, has come out of the Common Core funds in addition to testing. So the technology boot camps that we're offering and the ongoing support during the year.
And just to tag on, an example is science, the Bayside program.
Yes.
We were receiving grant dollars for that program. That grant money is going away. So if we want to keep going with that, then we would need Common Core dollars
Thank you, yes.
to do those kinds of things. So those are the things that we're going through now and looking for. That's why we'd say, somewhere, it would be great to have the 500,000, but somewhere between the 4 and the 5 would enable us to obviously keep a number of these things going, although we haven't heard yet from Ray. So.
I know you're talking about 4 to 5 that would sustain that element for more than 1 year.
Yeah.
Would that be, are you talking 2 years, or you're talking?
I'm estimating, I'm doing it, estimating over 2 years.
Yeah.
Julie?
How much?
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
If you have questions for Kathy.
How much is the Bayside grant that is going away?
The Bayside grant was, it funded, there wasn't a dollar figure because we received the service from the grant, so I would have to calculate that out for you, but I'd say it was at least at a minimum 30,000 a year, give or take. We didn't see those dollars, though, we received the service.
Right.
And
But we would have to pay for it.
We can
if
continue
we
with
want
that
to.
service, yes, and the technical support of science.
So, did you have more, Kathy, I was gonna ask Ray to.
Well, yeah, quick question. So this statement about the 500,000, is that saying that if we want to continue what we had, it would take 500,000?
Well, approximately, we have, somewhere between 4 and 5 over a couple of years, and we keep commitments that we have that are going.
I see.
That's what we were estimating.
Okay.
And Ray hasn't had an opportunity to share some of the contributions to technology from Common Core, but you could project those out.
Yeah, so as has been already mentioned, some of the Common Core monies that were used for technology included staffing support for technical support during the testing window. We've also used it for some equipment, both in terms of end user devices to demo and test the configuration of the testing software, as well as network equipment on the back end. And so that would be what we would continue to use those monies for if they were allocated to technology.
That's our sort of rough estimate.
So the question is, if we wanted to allocate those funds, at what point do we have to make that decision? And it seems like it's different for the Common Core than the technology. It feels like, but maybe I'm just not understanding. If we wanted to put some money toward technology, do we have to decide before June 30th this budget, or what, if we use this one-time money?
Well, anything we're talking about here in relation to the budget, we have between now and when you adopt. But to do the adjustments to the budget, Teresa would need to know that, so she can start working on making those adjustments before your next board meeting. So we have a window here, but it's not a lengthy. And that goes for anything that we want to change, whatever the topic. What Teresa had mentioned to you, and I would certainly validate, is that it would be a good idea to dedicate some of the one-time money to the Common Core good, so to speak, to keep some of these programs like that you heard. To be able to continue to purchase one-time allocations of equipment, services, and so forth. And we can do that at any time, but it would be important to recognize it if we want to do that in the budget, as well as anything else. But I think I'm speaking of the one time. I think the same thing applies. If we go back a few slides to your estimate of the components of the ending fund balance and the assumptions of expenditures, Nat asked Teresa to clarify the amount of money that's really available in the ongoing. I'm not sure everyone felt what that impact is, but you had said a little around $300,000.
That's of the 980,000 in the 15-16 that is unallocated.
Yeah,
Under 300,000 is ongoing.
yeah. So if you look at, can you go to the next page, or the page that is assumptions? You've got a whole set of expenditures there. So in the ongoing, after doing all those expenditures that are in there, we're not left with millions of dollars of discretionary funds in the ongoing. We're left with $294,000. That's about it. So that's not a wave of dollars. That's, it's more money, but that's it for everything, including all the expenditures there and anything else such as, are mentioned on the final page. We haven't closed out negotiations. We haven't done a number of things, and those are the dollars in the ongoing category that are left. And then you know the one-time dollars because we just talked about it.
So to the first part, if Sarah, can I follow up on your first part of the question in terms of where the slides left off in Common Core and process. Seems to me let's start with the one-time dollars and we can talk about the others. Is the process you're suggesting that staff is already thinking about ideal uses for Common Core funding and will come back to us before adoption on the 22nd so that we,
Yeah, no,
there's not enough time for that?
there's not enough time realistically to do that, other than, I mean, publicly right now, we're recommending that you consider targeting some of those one-time dollars for Common Core.
So we make our best guess
Yes.
So
in the
we're going to
budget?
say like up to a certain amount and then
Up
wait
to
for
500 is
better,
what-
Got it, got it. That's,
analysis from you.
That's what we're saying.
all right.
The 500,000, how I got that information was, the actual grant amount was like $499,950. It was like $5 off, but that was our Common Core allotment for over the 2 years. That's how I got the $500,000 amount.
And did that include any technology, or was that just?
Ray reviewed the technology that he expended from that amount.
That was included in the 500,000, the testing and staff and whatever? Okay.
Yes, and there was some, I think, from the previous year before Ray got here, we didn't go into that. but-
There was approximately, out of the 500,000, 150,000 was towards technology.
Thank you.
So if we approve, if we went ahead with some technology money now, whether it's 500,000 exactly, how would you decide how to allocate it?
Good question. So Ray has been working with OTAC, our OTAC committee, and he has suggested that he still needs to do some more work with them because they had a limited amount of time. And they haven't had time to process all of this. So we would be going back to him and to them to look for recommendations on that.
And that, of course, is the technology spending for Common Core purposes, not a separate topic which we need to address, which is proposals for other technology spending that would include ongoing funds. And same process for that, as we just discussed, there's no time between now and the budget to know what to do, but we could authorize an up to spending amount.
You could.
And how that could look is that I would just designate that amount of money in reserves, take it away from the 1.5 million and actually allocate 500,000, if that was the amount, to have a line item to where once decisions have been made as to what area of technology or Common Core, be it services, books, professional development, then I would allocate that reserve up to salaries, benefits, supplies, services.
Well, I'd be interested in finding out how much it would cost to implement what the parents clubs are talking about in terms of the kind of support for technology that they would like to see from the district.
So, correct me, why don't you take that?
Okay.
Correct me if I'm wrong. So where we're at with that is that right now, Ray is working on those numbers with OTAC.
With their
So we don't have those numbers. Is that a fair thing to say? Yeah.
But is it also fair to say that OTAC is looking at what the parents clubs were presenting and providing their own input on whether that is a recommended model or something a little bit different?
Yeah, so last Monday we met with OTAC and we looked at and reviewed what the parents had, what the coordinating council had presented in terms of their wish list. And we got feedback from OTAC members about what might be an ideal level of staffing for support. Now, keep in mind this was done without any budgetary numbers in mind, and so really I guess the next component or next phase would be to cost out that level of staffing and compare it to what types of allotment would be targeted towards support and staffing. So.
And it seems to me, Ray, that it's really important for OTAC, and I'd look to see what sort of guidance you need from the board to understand just the distinction we were talking about, that we have some one-time costs, in one-time funds and limited ongoing funds, and what options we have given the needs that have been presented in terms of staffing. Other than the real numbers we see before us, so it's a little obvious, is there direction from the board you need on that, or something that you'll come back to us with?
I think the level of staffing that was recommended from OTAC was under the assumption of them being full-time or just your standard employees, and so given that we're looking at one-time monies, that may not be a realistic assumption, and so I think if we can if I can bring back to OTAC, a sort of a dollar amount, and it doesn't have, it can be just an assumption, a working assumption, that would give us, a dollar target to sort of cost out what might be an implementable solution.
Is there a way of achieving the goals that everyone has by using contracted services somehow? I mean, is that like something that could even be, rather than hiring people directly, but, hiring sort of how we did other people on a contract basis for the testing, right? I mean, that was probably contracted service.
Yeah, I think some components of that technology support could be contracted services. I think there's certain areas where, particularly with the instructional technology component, that typically staff in those areas tend to be regular full-time employees in districts, and so it may be potentially difficult to staff those types of positions. But it's something certainly that OTAC could look at and evaluate.
Well, this also begs the question in my mind, we do have a second tech that we're trying to hire, and I understand that hasn't happened yet. I don't know why we haven't found somebody, but I just want to bring it up because I want to make sure whatever we're doing, we're going to, it seems too bad to have an open spot there and not be able to fill it. I don't know if you feel like there's somebody to fill the spot on the horizon in the near future.
Yeah, so we're actually conducting interviews for that position this Wednesday. We did keep the recruitment open for a somewhat extended period of time to field the best and widest applicant pool that we could have. And so I think we're looking at the people that are interviewing on Wednesday. I think we'll be fairly confident that we'll be able to hire someone, a qualified candidate for the position.
The only thing I'll add, Sarah, is it's a tough position to hire for. People that are able to do that job have a lot of options out there right now.
So we've experienced this in the past, that it's hard to find people to do those positions.
So whatever we do going forward, we want to, try to avoid that situation if we can.
Like substitute teachers.
Not easy to do. So I have one other question that I have to ask is, so where are we in terms of reserves?
Teresa had some slides that reviewed the reserves. Did you have any particular ones you have?
Well, I guess I was referring to in our budget guidelines, we asked that we try to maintain 9%. So is that what we're doing? 8%?
8%?
Oh.
So we need to have a conversation about whether we want some of that, I assume it would come from that mandated cost reimbursement, and that 1%.
If you want to.
Either that or we need to change our budget guidelines to.
Sorry, I missed it. Was that on this slide?
Yes, on line 32, on slide number 28.
Yeah, I see.
We are currently funding the economic uncertainties, the 3%, which is the minimum, plus an additional 5%, so we're at 8%. The budget goal is 9%.
So it's not like we got a lot of reserves there. We don't have a 9%. So I just bringing that up because if we add, ongoing positions,
Well, we would take, if we want, we can take 1% from that mandated cost reimbursement on 30 and add it to our designated for economic uncertainties, so that we're back up to 9%. So we need to make a decision about that.
And if we took 1%, how much is 1% again?
It would be 1% of the, backwards, of the 27,668,000, so it's about $276,000.
276?
Yes.
And then we're also talking about that mandated cost reimbursement. That's where we get any money that we need. If we need the Common Core, it comes from there, or any other ongoing.
Do you adjust the economic uncertainties line item throughout the year?
Yes, it is adjusted
So it just has
at
not-
first interim and second interim. And
Okay, so it's just below 8, it's below the 9% just because of the time of year we're at?
it currently is not funded at the 9%, even in the 14-15 year.
So in other words, given our spending, there's no more to put in.
That's correct.
Well, I feel like we should allocate the 500,000 for the Common Core. I'm willing to recommend that. I don't know, I'm not prepared to recommend anything further about technology because it's just too hard for me to see and understand and whatever. So maybe someone else wants to address that.
I'd like to see us do something for the technology, but it seems to me, given what we just heard, that Raymond, even though that jams us a little for the next meeting, we really need more information, even to try to do some sort of set aside.
What about a placeholder?
I mean, we could, but I don't know what that number would be.
Well, what do you think about we take 1%, 274, we backfill to get to our 9%? I've heard more than one person on the board say that, I think we have consensus on the board that we want to support the Common Core effort to the tune of $500,000 over 2 years,
Up to.
or up to, better said. And then my question is there consensus on the board on technology? Joe, are you comfortable with us putting a placeholder out on something like this? On technology? Is that the kind of direction you want? Do you want us to say we'd like you to set aside?
So if, a couple of things. Are you talking about ongoing and one time?
We're talking about one time.
You're talking about one time.
Am I okay? Is everybody comfortable with me
Yes,
saying
but
that?
we do have to address the ongoing
Yeah,
too,
I
but
wanted
let's
to
start
check.
with the one time.
I felt like we were talking about that.
I think either, both of those categories, if there's if each of you have a sense that that's what you'll want to do, that this is the time to give us that signal, but I think before you ask that question, also.
I'm going to take this out to public comment and then bring it back to the board.
So I got one more quick question though about
Okay.
what Joe just said.
Go ahead.
In terms of on technology, and then he said one time, if we wanted to allocate some one-time money for technology, can we do that with a position, whether it's contracted or whatever? Can we
Maybe,
do
maybe not.
one-time?
We
Okay.
don't have an answer.
There's a complication with contracting out work that's performed by collective bargaining units. So some of that work can't be contracted out on a one-time basis because it's done by people in the district.
Right, I understand it's awkward, but I didn't,
That's the check.
right, I wasn't sure if that's what you were referring to.
Now it's time for public comment. Charles?
Charles Shannon, President. I'm real surprised with the number of 500,000. It seems very hypothetical. There wasn't any documentation to support that. We heard that we have ELA, science, history, social studies to support, and yet there were no numbers and no reasoning behind where that number comes from. I'm not opposed to money going to Common Core, But I think to just throw out a number like 500,000 and then get board support for that is not responsible. I'm hearing that we need to bring up the 8% to the 9%. There's no discussion about our current funding and how we may not even need to maintain a 9%. I'm just hearing that loosely put out there, well, you know, we should just raise it up to 9%. And there aren't any clear indicators that we're going to face an economic crisis anytime soon. So it seems a bit premature to want to bring that rate back up to 9%. There's no reasoning. I don't hear anyone discussing the reasoning behind bringing it up to 9%. I need educated conversation up there about why you're doing what you're doing. Because we're talking about big dollar amounts that I'm hearing from technology that we may need to hire people to provide services, but being there when we were talking about our standards, they were pretty simple in my grade level, and I don't want to pay somebody $100,000 with salary and benefits to do what I can already do in the lab. I am speaking on my own behalf on that issue, but teachers have not been surveyed. I've heard some parent groups saying that teachers support hiring someone to teach computer skills in the lab, but that's not coming from OEA. That's from some conversations that parents are having with teachers. So I feel like we need to get input from teachers. There needs to be a process and not just these hypothetical conversations about, you know, we need to put this money aside. I'm sure glad I don't run my finances that way. I do all my research, I put it out there, I look at it, and I make an educated decision. And I'm not seeing that tonight with this decision, and I'm disappointed.
Sonia?
Hi, Sonia Grover from Wagner Ranch Parents Club. I don't know about all the other schools.